Welcome to the lecture series on object-oriented analysis and design. This lecture is something which is very unique to the entire object-oriented technology, namely use case. Out of the 9 diagrams, use case diagram is something that is so fascinating that it's a correct bridge between the developers, the stakeholders and the domains. Eventually we do ask that question, after everything is done, what is its use? What is it that we are using it for? So we have used several terminologies saying that yes, the piece of software is useful to us in this. There is a criteria which is very commonsensical to understand, saying that it is useful. Then we keep arguing that nothing in the creation is useless. Only thing is we have to think as to how to use something properly. Maybe a bit of philosophy, but then anything that is given, anything that you come across has some use, if only we think about how to use it properly. So without too much of philosophy, we talk about software development. How quickly can you understand that this is the exercise we are doing, it's useful for this? We means all people, people who are programmers, people who are non-programmers, people coming from different domains. So we first began this exercise in the traditional way of software development, namely what we called user interface. It all began with user interface. Until then, maybe 96 I should say, 1996, until then we have been talking predominantly about taking things more and more towards the machine, almost forgetting the user by the time we touch the run button. So it is done for the machine, it runs on the machine. It's up to the user, they will have to sit down, rackle their brains. We have been commenting very aggressively on what we had at that point in time, namely command line interfaces. That is, you should have some idea about what is the command that makes the machine do what I want to do. You should not only be clear about what I want to do as what is made available on the machine, and remember, but also remember what is the command that makes it done. These commands were very cryptic, outlandish, almost dubbed Greek and Latin, which nobody understands, neither the user understands nor the developer understands. But then that's how they were. There was no scope because the system is so limited, the machine is so limited that we simply didn't have a scope to do anything outside of a command line interface, CLI. The most dominant ideas on CLI were both from Unix as well as the DOS world. The disk operating system, imagine a very rudimentary 286 machine, let us say they were the best at some point in time when I started seriously working on DOS machines. That was the best machine, 286 was the best machine. Now nobody talks about it, it's an archaic machine. So you had a floppy and then you had your MS-DOS operating system, and what happened there was that the idea of commands was so cryptic that it takes some time to understand, and essentially what happens to the user we don't want to explore. Hardly 10 to 15 commands, if I know by heart, it is enough for the work that I am doing. A vast potential of the operating system simply remains unused, simply remains unexplored. Neither the user is interested nor the fellow who is making the operating system is interested. It does so many things, but most of the time you make a note of what are the frequently used commands, keep them in mind, proceed with that. We end up with that. Till today that problem exists. Even a few minutes back I was sharing with the colleagues saying that I am good on PowerPoint, but I only use 5 to 7% of the features of PowerPoint, latest, the PowerPoint presentation. My colleagues here are experts. I send my raw PowerPoint presentation, it comes presentable in a Ziffy. Just give it to them and all the slides will become very presentable for this exercise. I had no idea as to how to do a few things, but they tell this is how it is going to be done. There are users, there are power users, and it's simply not possible for gaining expertise on so many tools also. Now the point I wish to make is there is something innate in the user. At that time it was only command line interfaces. Now it is a fantastic graphical user interface, but still it is 5 to 7% only of the piece of software that we are talking about. This is the root cause of why a service oriented architecture based on software as a service is happening. I use only this many, I pay only this many. Why should I buy the full truckload of software features when I use only this much? Makes sense, makes business sense, but then coming back to the point, we had this idea of a command line interface where nothing other than a prompt comes on the screen. You will have to think about what you want to do, you will have to think about precisely how to couch it in a command which is executed by the machine. This was becoming a very, very big exercise. We really did not have any other method for so many years that we have almost made so many users turn away from the machine. It's a big drudgery. What I want to do, I think. What I think, it should happen. There must be a way in which I express my thought. So what we kept on saying is that a lot of things that we need to talk about, we keep saying the same old stories. From the command line, what is the next idea? What did we do? We said we'll go into the screen mode. The next idea was the screen mode. We somehow have the entire screen for myself and I can work on the screen, saying that is screen editors. I'll see 20 lines, not only one line, 20 lines, 20 commands. The more I see the context, the better it is for me to recall the command. Only when we get into the context, something about the user is like that. I don't think about everything that I have to do after 6 o'clock. When 6 o'clock happens, I end up in a place, then I think about what are the potential things that I can do. We are like that as humans, exceedingly good sequential thinkers. And we like to get focused on the work at hand. That's when the work happens. So what we have done, therefore, the next one is a screen editor. Then gradually we started talking about building further on the screen editor, make it a window. This window is doing this, this window is doing this, this window is doing this. Gradually we moved to what is called graphical user interfaces, which are also called windows, icons, menus and pointers, WIMP interfaces, windows, icons, menus and pointers. Today, unless it is a graphical user interface, we are not likely to make anything attractive. Whether it is a project, product, whatever it is, it's expected. Thanks to Microsoft, the stylistics are the simple elements of push buttons, menus, drop down menus, pull down menus, all the things that we know about. So the user interface design was the very first step to make things clearer to the user what he can potentially do based on what he wants to do. Is it enough? Definitely not enough. Because user interface became an afterthought. It is not something we want to start with. What is our focus? How to make it efficient on the machine, how to be true to the intent. What was the intent with which we started? What is the complexity which we are addressing? At that level of complexity, we want to deal with the intent, we want to preserve the intent of what? Of the people who define the requirements. They are not likely to be there by the time the software arrives. They are not talking about building software for the actual people who have to use it. They are the people who are championing the cause of computerization, automation, and therefore they are not likely to see the ground realities themselves. The abstraction is good, but then how to make it to the ground reality, that's where the object-oriented analysis began to tell us precisely, saying that you see the top down is good, but the bottom up we are not able to meet across at an optimal point. In the process, we found that the user is coming very late. The ideas of object-oriented analysis and design were very, very helpful in saying that in theory it is possible to have what is called user-centered design at the design phase. However, all the topics that I am talking about began to be called usability engineering, where we talk about it becomes very obvious, saying that the very nature of human is different. It is not something that readily welcomes a machine. You have to put in effort to have the man and the machine work together towards a common exercise. It's an effort, it's a very good effort. So what we need to understand therefore is that we need a discipline called usability, which was a quality factor which was taking a beating. Most of the times it was taking a beating. Usability is one of those process metrics. It's a quality factor. It was taking a beating because user is not the focus. User is not coming in the mid time also. User is likely to happen in our minds very close to that finish. So we said, let's tuck away many things about the user to the implementation phase. Anyhow we are going there, we'll talk it over to them. We created that simple phase called acceptability testing. Is it acceptable what we have done? So these are certain things which we have been talking about. Essentially that quality factor called usability started telling us that it is necessary that we define something called usability engineering and blend it with software engineering. That became a profession by itself. Usability has phenomenal interdisciplinarity, drawing from expertise from various domains like psychology, artificial intelligence, talk about symbiotics, so many things, etymologies, so many areas have been blending together in a field called usability engineering. And at some point in time, we were estimating that if a project takes 100 hours, 50 hours should be budgeted for usability engineering for best results. Didn't really happen, very difficult to get. We were talking about process improvement area of 2% to 16%, that itself was a very big achievement. So user-centered design from this kind of an approach, study the user, study the software development, put them together. This kind of an approach did not really fly so high or as expected. User interface design, usability, user-centered design took us up to a point. Some kind of an improvement was definitely there before we talk about either implementation or talk about a delivery phase or even a deployment phase. But the good news is that we have brought into sharper focus that user cannot be thought of later. The sooner we bring the user, continuous and early involvement of users, and what gave us maximum thrust is the website world. We should bring them into focus very fast. The web usability became the #1 reason why the idea of usability engineering took wings much faster than what we expected also. So we said, let there be the idea of user interface, user-centered design, usability engineering. Then came the next idea, the process definition of agile, which we have been talking about in the earlier lectures. They talk about user stories. It's a very good idea again. Users are not technology people. They don't understand technology. They don't talk the lingua franca of the technology. So what we did was that the agile people came up with this simple idea called user story. Tell me, what do you want to do with this? You want to have a vending machine. What is it that you are talking about as a vending machine? They do not describe the artifact at all. I need something where, sometimes occasionally I go to an airport and I feel very, very thirsty. I want to take a cool drink. Say for example, the other day I have gone to such a such place where I was very, very hot, was looking up for a cool drink and was not there, simply not there. I didn't know where it was. So they tell based on their experiences. Simple example that I am talking about, which relates to the lectures that I have given. These are certain things which I wish to have. I wish it was like that. I wish more like a wishful thinking. It doesn't matter to me. So what the agile people did is, between 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening, that 8 working hours, what are the user stories which we can handle depending on what we have done till this point in time. So they take up the user story, let them talk, let them give a story. It is not completely anecdotal, but then there is a felt need in that. There is a felt need in that. This has to be told. If you can sense that felt need, that makes business for us. There is a need, that is what we do, need based, as we keep talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which motivates us to look at it. So we want to have this user story in a manner where it is not anecdotal, but is reflecting a need, not merely a wish list, it tells a need. So we write that. It is not simply a fact that we want to do this many command lines are provided, how to work on that. No, the user story tries to get that felt need in that simple capsule manner, that for this day of agile process, that is how it started, agile process between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, this is what we do, this is what we should be doing. So there is a good building. What is the requirement? A lot of people, the story starts like this, plenty of students, plenty of classrooms. Now the question is where to locate a water cooler. It's a fantastic building, where to locate a water cooler. So the user story will simply tell, keep it in a manner where there is not much of pipelining necessary. There is a need. The need is felt, we would want to have a water cooler. Then what happens? Where to keep it? We cannot have too much of plumbing work, minimize the plumbing work. So it is a 4-floor building. Do you want to have the water cooler in the ground floor? That is the beginning of use case. That is the beginning of use case. Ground floor is easy because the plumbing is minimum, they perhaps have a sump, they take care of so many things. It does not do much. The user story simply tells that very good need is there must be a water cooler. Where it is located, what it is located is up to you, your way of thinking what is optimal. You would go ahead and do it, it is an optimality criteria. Where is the user interface coming? The user interface is stepping in after the user story, the felt need is expressed. How to operate it? It is more operational in this case. In this case where we are addressing, it is only operational. So wherever it is located, it must have a switch on. We must have an indicator whether it is having good water or not. For example, water is there or not. Then we should have a glass, we should have an easy way of telling that this is how we should press it. Now user interface design, usability, all of them have given us some good topics like affordance. You do not need a PhD or you do not need a user manual to use a water cooler. Everything looks familiar. That is the purpose of standardization. The user interface standards at all levels, at operating system level, GUI level, the standards speak for themselves. They simply tell that this is what is expected to do. You do not take more than half a minute or 1 minute to find out how to use a water cooler, even though you have not seen it before. Anytime you have not seen it, there is a glass there and so on and so forth. Now what is the requirement? The requirement is we go into a bit more detailing, but that should happen up front. What was the user story doing? It is highlighting a need and leaving it to the developer. There is a need for it. It becomes very, very obvious that the user will need it. Beyond that, it is not telling anything. All the other nice words, story-like things, anecdotal things will vanish because it comes to the developer desk by 9:05 a.m. it goes to the developer desk, hardly 5 minutes. So we are able to assess the felt need. Gradually agile programming, agile practices began to become matured. We are now talking about longish life cycles. We are talking about not merely user stories, we are talking up to epics, longish exercise which we do. So the felt need is the highlight of a user story. A user interface does this. Now what is the concern here? If you want to be business wise, these are not adequate. Even though plenty of advances have happened, we are still hitting the rock. We are not able to justify how the user will eventually feel happy that he is into the focus. Object-oriented has promised how by Ivar Jacobson's object-oriented software engineering method, which gave us this nice business idea called use case. Tell me, what are the types of users? Users are people who, one type of users are people who regularly clean up the water cooler. They need to do so and so thing. Their needs are different. It is not enough to tell that a water cooler is needed. The types of users, the blending, happy blending of the idea of user story and usability is reflected upfront, step 1 in use case. Use case driven software development therefore began to gain lot of attention, lot of importance, getting a good start with better requirement management. A good start is half the battle won, but the remaining half the battle should also be won. It's a very good start. It has been proving to be a wonderful idea. Ivar Jacobson is an award-winning designer and developer. So use case driven development, getting a good start with better requirement management. Very quickly, when all your people who are envisaging what is that software that is to be developed are here, we tell that this is what the user is going to upfront at that phase. Object oriented has this unique idea called use case. All other things are more towards the middle, design, and a process based, agile, epic based, a need is felt. Maximum we could bring the user in earlier traditional methods is up to the design, user centered design, early involvement and where they are effective. The effect is seen, the efficiency is seen. However, 2 to 16%, some limited improvement using the same old good ideas which I have been talking about. But there is a significant improvement for nearly 10 years. For nearly 10 years is a significant improvement. Then came the 2005 onwards, which is what is called use case driven development, which has taken wings, and it gives us a very good start at the very idea of the concept, conceptual level. You get a very good start. And how do they look at? What are the objectives? Understand what is meant by use case driven development, understand the benefits of use case driven development. So I can tell upfront, straight away that question comes. So we draw using a green color in our case tool. User in green is the person who actually cleans up the water cooler. User in blue are the typical users. In a 4-storied building, how many blue users are in first floor, second floor, third floor and ground floor? Of which how many people drink water? So we define that blue, and what do they want to do? They do not want to open up the water cooler. Even though it has to be opened, right away at the beginning we can tell that this is what is going to happen. Then comes the next fellow who is service engineer, red color user. Occasionally they come as service engineer, or when a breakdown is happening, a service is there. So use case is likely to tell us that not only optimized based on what the machine architecture or what the building architecture is telling, we should also optimize in this manner. So we are now talking about intelligent building. So many things we have been talking about, where to locate a light, where to locate something. We have now talked about the illumination. So many good ideas have come. Computerization and the way in which we are constructing have become very closely knit. We are talking about so many ideas now. Understand how the IBM software development platform toolset supports another case tool which had a very good focus on use case. The UML is standard, but this particular tool is very impressive because it takes care of a very good challenge, managing your requirements, analysis, design, coding, unit test, acceptance and maintenance. So what is the concern here? The cost of the repair. If it is at the analysis phase, if you find out that something has gone wrong, it just costs you $1 or $2. After design, $5. After coding, $10. After acceptance test, $20. After maintenance, $50. After that, $200. So please understand that the cost is, this is all a very modest estimate again. So the sooner we trap the errors, what are the maximum errors? We didn't understand what was the problem from the stakeholders, because they themselves don't know how to explain the problem, what they are facing, if you want to call it a problem. They are only telling that most of the times we are running into this kind of a tough corner. They are explaining, they are trying their best, they are very sincere because they have to pay the money at the end of the day and we want to make profits. We are also quite sincere. But however, the clarity of thinking about the problem is simply just not there. So we have been vexed with this blame game happening when the delivery phase is happening. Upfront we have been telling that this is what should have been done, this is what should have been done. On the run, on the customer side, it has become a very big headache. So therefore, use case is a blessing. We moved very firmly, very clearly to what is called use case. In theory, use cases can be done without talking about the entire UML, but then in practice they go hand in hand very well with the overall structure of the UML. So right at the front, analysis or very beginning, if we can talk about the things which are called use cases, then there is nothing much better than that. So the business driven development wants the business to understand what happens at the operations, and the operations should understand what is business. In the traditional way of looking at things, from the business we were venturing into this place, development, analyst, architect, developer, tester. We move from business to this. Actually we should have a closer link between these two, and we should have a fueling. These fellows should understand that business and operations, when they are closely linking to each other, we see use cases. So that is where we are talking about all the things that are mentioned, saying that priorities, we talk about way in which we do deployment, we talk about what is it called, the deployment here, management, optimization, everything that I have spoken about, business model, talked about analysis and design, everything that I have been speaking about in this series of lectures. A project manager has to govern. Initially, what was the direction? From the business, executives, end users are all there, and the operations, we started talking about this direction. If we know this much at the top, we can go here. What was happening? We found that we need to create one more specialization called operational excellence. That becomes a specialization. In this route, we need operational excellence. Most of the time, the operations is something which is not really readily seen here, but then why are they doing business? To get at the end. Their job, their profit, everything is at the operations. So in summary, the business driven development approach needs to understand how the development team will quickly link business and operations. This is a significant advantage of use case driven approach, and object oriented analysis right from day one has been promising that that can be the first step. Instead of doing all this and then trying to build operational excellence, which is much more than user interface design, usability engineering, user-centered design, building on user stories, it is the hard way of working on the floor of what the business is doing. All businesses are not merely packages or software packages, how to use PowerPoint. That is not the business. Their business is elsewhere. The phenomenal interdisciplinarity which software engineering enjoys today is making it more and more imperative to talk about this linkage first, at the earliest, when things are so abstract, when we know that the requirements will change, the requirements are volatile, changes will happen, lot of change requests come. The best bet so far is use case driven development promised by object oriented analysis and design. Thank you. We'll meet again in the next lecture.